All right, everybody. I really want to say I appreciate you being here. My name is Benjamin Diggles, one of the co-founders of Constellation Network. The title for this thing might be partly why people are like, what the hell is this? It's not the right title. It's actually protecting America and restoring trust using blockchain and AI. So blockchain of blockchains is probably one of the most malaise descriptions you can think of. But I'm so excited to be here. I'm going to be your moderator here for the next half hour. And I'm joined here by Chris Tolles and Erik Bethel and Aidan Clifford. I'm going to go ahead and go down the line here and have you guys introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your company just to get things started. We'll start with you, Chris.
Hey, I'm Chris Tolles. I've been in the technology industry for 30 years. I am currently an executive advisor at the Common Crawl Foundation. We provide a crawl of the internet for anybody who wants one for free. And for the most part, for the first 10 years of our existence, that was researchers and academics. But more recently, it's every single AI in the world uses us for their training data. And so we are a 9 petabyte file that people want to get potentially securely, which is why we're working with Constellation to be able to connect to people in the government and elsewhere to get a secure and authenticated version of our training data powered by the Common Crawl.
You rock, buddy. Erik?
So I am a fellow at the Digital Chamber, and I wear many hats, but one of them is, until fairly recently, I was the US Director at the World Bank, and we were trying to use blockchain, and we still are, to create blockchain-enabled loans such that countries around the world can benefit from the World Bank in a transparent and in a manner that has good governance. There's another part of this which is related to Chris. The World Bank sits on petabytes of data going back to the 1940s, and if we could harvest that data, run it through a blockchain, run it through Constellation, and ultimately be able to make decisions based on years and years and years of data, that would be phenomenal. So, Aidan, over to you.
All right, I'm Aidan Clifford. I work for Panasonic TOUGHBOOK. Panasonic's a really big place. We do a lot of things.
Where is it?
Yeah, here's your TOUGHBOOK right here. There you go.
Hey.
I was told I was the first one with a prop here on the stage. So, my job right now is to look at the emerging technologies and the way that we can evolve the TOUGHBOOK business. We have a really unique position that we have a high amount of market share in some very specific industries around public safety, military, DOD operations, healthcare, especially emergency healthcare. And we're really excited to work with Constellation to think about how we use that platform to evolve in a data way, in the data side of the business, and how we can help our customers. So.
Rock on, guys. Well, I appreciate that. So as you can tell, we've got some pretty amazing people here. We have one of the largest AI data sets, the ex-director of the World Bank, as well as one of the largest infrastructure partners in the world. So we're very excited to have this discussion. And for those that saw Ben Jorgensen, our CEO's keynote earlier, trust is at an all-time low. That's sort of what is supposed to be on the thing here, is protecting America and restoring trust. As we all know, what we see, and seeing isn't believing anymore. We've seen some amazing things happen, whether you like it or not, with DOGE uncovering and reducing trust by saying, wow, they've been spending that, and then increasing it by like, hey, thanks for exposing that to us because now we trust you a little bit more. But the one thing that's a commonality is that trust is at its all-time low, and there's a big demand for transparency. And so because of this, we're in an interesting nexus point as a civilization that if we can use certain technologies like blockchain, it can really unlock and really help in this regard. But at the same time, technology largely is something that got us into this. So I want to actually start with Aidan over here, talking a little bit about the infrastructure, because those that know Panasonic, I don't know how old they are, 150 years old?
120.
120 years old. I think they're a Fortune 250 or something like that. I guarantee you there's all sorts of Panasonic gear being used in this room today. And the TOUGHBOOK is one of the most trusted laptops. It's the #1 ruggedized laptop in the market. And last year they decided to put AI chipsets in these. They got in the game at a very early point. And so these machines now are being used in ways to restore that trust. However, we still have to combat adversaries. And so, Aidan, I want to talk a little bit about, from your perspective, and talking about the expansion of where the TOUGHBOOK collection is headed in regards to trust, transparency, and just bolstering a larger marketplace moving forward.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we have a unique position to be able to be in the hands of a lot of frontline people that are doing really tough jobs. What we also have been around a long time, so we have a lot of customer trust and a lot of brand awareness around what we do, which leads to, I think, a lot of our customers being open and very honest with us about their issues and needs, and they see us as a trusted advisor in a lot of those ways. We constantly keep hearing about, the ability to create more data integration, more data security. They see the ToughBook as their portal, their window into all these different data sets, and we see an opportunity there as a partner with our customers to kind of come alongside and evolve the way we do business. The other big thing that we're doing today is we have a thriving automotive business, so we make a lot of EV batteries. This is different divisions of Panasonic, obviously. We have a vehicle component business. We make vehicle screens and chipsets and all kinds of things that go into cars. So we're, and it just so happens the ToughBook itself, 70+% of the time usually gets implemented into a car as well. So whether it's a police car or a fire engine or a military tank or a utility bucket truck, these are almost always used synonymously with vehicles, and we really want to take that and lean heavy into that horizontal use case. And so we're developing solutions around connected vehicle, and that creates more data. Right now, you have more OBD data coming off the vehicle, going to the cloud, not just the first line of business applications that our customers are using. And it's a problem that we are in a position to potentially help our customers solve for. So we really we see that as a big evolution point for our business, and kind of leaning into those industries that we've served for so long. We like to say we serve in those that serve and protect, right? We're a servant to those type of industries, so we want to continue that momentum.
That's fantastic, yeah. And this, one of the big part of our partnership with Panasonic around the announcement of our digital evidence product and providing that liability assurance and that provable guarantees at the data source. And there's no better portal than the ToughBook when you think about how many critical systems rely on that. And so if we're really at that nexus point, it's going to be, it's a game changer, right? However, as we can all attest from seeing what has sort of evolved from last year's digital summit, when it was very somber, everybody hated Gary Gensler, there was nothing really happening. It's really a time when we think about a company like Panasonic that wants to get in the blockchain game, as well as many other legacy institutions, but they're waiting for that regulation. They're waiting for the government to make some decisions on like, hey, how does this stuff work? And I know most of it is on the cryptocurrency side. We've been very, I would say, blessed to be working with the Department of Defense for 6 years on just blockchain. We don't talk about digital assets to them. We're talking about hardening databases and making them more optimized for more mission critical communications and other orchestrations. But this bleeds into my question for you, Erik. I mean, you've been on the front line, not only from representing the World Bank from a local, national level, but also you've seen what has eroded from seeing a lot of these developments get pushed overseas from finance as well as innovation. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that topic.
Well, I'm not a regulator, but I do think that we have technology that is absolutely critical for the United States to be a part of, and for.
We can hear you.
You can hear me? Yeah, I heard some strange beeping sounds.
It's probably dying.
It's the Chinese.
Something's dying. Yeah,
It's the Chinese.
The CCP.
Yeah, there we go. Damn it.
So, and so here is a brand new technology similar to the internet, similar to many other technologies, and due to a lack of thoughtful regulation or antagonism, I would say, we've pushed it overseas, which to me seems foolish. So I think as a that beeping sound again. Oh, is it the earphones?
It's the ToughBook.
It's causing interference.
Yes.
All right. So I think it's important for us to and I want to underscore the word thoughtful. If it's too much, like we have in Europe, Europe has thousands upon thousands of pages of crypto, blockchain, and Web3 regulations. On a spectrum, no regulation is bad. Antagonism is certainly bad, but over-regulation is bad. So I think that that those that are thinking through these topics need to be very thoughtful about it. Back to the World Bank though for a second, and maybe this pivots again into what Chris is doing. we face a trust deficit that really needs to get addressed. Many of you may recall Google's ill-fated, AI, Bard, where now Gemini, which didn't portray truth the way we would think. And so one of the broader concerns I have is what is truth, and how do you trace the provenance of data, which is why I think Constellation is superb at this. But I'll turn it back over to you guys.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, so, I know you have a strong opinion, which we're going to come back to on the surge of AI, right? I'm actually kind of surprised at this conference that has not been a big topic. I'm just used to it being everywhere, right? I don't know if there's anybody in this room that's not on their phone or their workflow that there's some AI assistant popping up being like, let me help you write this. Clippy's back in a big way. So this is why we partner with Common Crawl. And take no offense, Chris, but a lot of people don't even know what Common Crawl is. It's like one of those like Linux moments where it's involved in so many things and people use it every single day, but they have no idea the origins of what is being expressed. And so when we talk about the dovetail between government regulations and the future of trust and validity, tell us about Common Crawl a little bit from that perspective and where you see things headed.
Well, thank you very much. It's in the case of the government and acquiring the data to make foundational AI models, some of the concerns we've gotten from our conversations with the government, of various folks inside the US government, and I think these mirror conversations with large industry partners as well. They're concerned about people coming in and messing with the data that they're getting to train on. And in particular, there are some interesting attacks that you could go to a domain that we crawl that's essentially out of kaput, and go and buy that domain and start putting stuff into it that like if you thought, oh, this is a school district website that maybe we crawled, and all of a sudden maybe they're going to put in some propaganda of some sort, or something that changes. So there's some attacks here that people are concerned about. Beyond that, there's also the idea that as you're taking a 9 petabyte file from the Amazon server where it lies, the S3 data bucket where it lies, to wherever you're trying to get it inside the government, that somewhere along the line it's going to get adulterated. And so we are in the process of building out what's called a Merkle tree to provide a cryptographic authentication for every single component inside the 9 petabyte file. We're working with Constellation to hand them the keys so that someone can use Constellation's blockchain to be able to say, hey, I'm getting what I think I'm going to get. And I think Constellation, in focusing on authentication and trust, goes a long way to things we haven't heard about as much from the crypto industry. And I completely support that direction, something that we think is very important. In fact, I started my career in technology on encryption and firewalls and being able to put things over the internet securely. So I think that's where we really focus on, and how that where dovetails into what we're doing with Constellation.
Well, let me see if I understand this. You all scrape the internet for everything.
Crawl, yes.
You crawl, and AI uses. You are the biggest in this space, right?
So it turns out the large language model based AI that we've all been seeing in the last several years came about something called the Transformer paper that was written by Google, put in the public domain. And there are 3 components of making these large language models. One is the paper, the models themselves, the large language model. The second is compute, which is why NVIDIA is over $1 trillion, because you need a lot of computational resources. The third is the data. So it turns out to train a foundational model, to teach it English essentially, or to teach it how to think, you need a very, very large amount of data. And in fact, the only folks that can create this, Google single-handedly could probably do it themselves, but they'd still use us. The only data that's out there available for free that is large enough to power a foundational model is pretty much us. Where I think 80% of the tokens in the ChatGPT 3, when the last time they came up and said, here's where our tokens come from, we're about 80% of them, or Common Crawl is 80% of them. So you got the data, you've got the compute, and you've got the model. And so we're powering the LLM training for all those different people. So if you want to do a new foundational model, you need to get a model, you need to go off and buy enough computers, and then you need to go get some data from somewhere, and that's where we come in.
And theoretically, somebody could write a fake New York Times piece with a bunch of propaganda in it, and you would crawl it, but how would you verify if it's authentic or not? This is where a Constellation would come in, right?
Yeah, so it would be to verify that the block that you think is coming from us is coming from us. We're going to basically provide a hash function that says, this URL, the New York Times, is definitively it's cryptographically secure to be there, and then we're going to put that into a big block of other URLs which are similarly cryptographically protected, and then at the top of that list we're going to provide a key. We're going to hand that key to Constellation, who will then distribute it and put the rest of those keys on their blockchain. So when you're in the government saying, "Oh, I want a copy of the 9 petabytes of Common Crawl," you don't have to get all 9 petabytes to be on the blockchain. You're getting essentially the keys to that section, and so as you're loading it, you can cross-check that what you're getting is what you think you're getting.
Yeah, I mean, I often say, AI is like taking the toothpaste out of the tube. We can't put it back in. I mean, Erik and I were talking just today about how are we going to deal with adversarial AI, because these algorithms, they just have outputs no matter what gets put in. And if we don't have checks and balances on what's being put in, then we don't really have checks and balances on what's getting pushed out. And that causes a big problem right now. I mean, I'm a fast hyper learner. I learn a ton very quickly, and this is the first year I can't keep up. I'm trying to consume as many of these AI tools as possible, and they are insane, but there's no governance. There's nothing behind that's giving me that confidence of like, who's listening to this? Where'd this data come from? Where's it going? And this is often the flight of humans, right? We often just kind of get into the conveniences or the shiny objects, not really thinking or contemplating about the implications.
Let me just say one thing, though.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Because the internet is so trustworthy by itself. Oh, and before that, because the newspapers are so trustworthy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, this is the idea that, there are hallucinations. Like, have you read the New York Post ever? I mean, it comes down to, there's always, the great thing about humans, as a guy who built a search engine and before that built a big web directory, is that people, and this is why you can't easily cheat the stock market, because as soon as you try something, other people are going to come in and try to mess with you. And AI is no different. It's not like it's going to solve all our problems with authenticity and trust. You can do things to understand where you're getting it from. But look, you can't trust anything ever. There's always going to be some amount of skepticism you should bring to the table, whether it's NBC and the Tonkin Gulf incident, or whether it's who's messing with who on Instagram, or whether AI is telling you the world's going to end. I mean, I think that we'll figure it out. I'm not worried that humans are going to come back and go, ChatGPT might not be the right person to trust, thing to trust for this. But we can. That's where Constellation comes in to say we can go somewhere down the road to say, well, we know this. Now we have to go off and figure out what to do with it.
Yeah. I mean, that makes total sense, and I totally agree, right? There's no silver bullet. I just think that there should be an opportunity for discernment and the ability for folks to have more information than what we're giving today, and then they can choose if they want to trust it or not. But no information is the wrong answer, in my opinion, especially when it comes to trusting some of these black box systems. But speaking of AI, we're going to go back to that cool TOUGHBOOK. Last year in June, they had released the TOUGHBOOK 40, which has an AI chipset locally on the machine. And this allows for the processing of data at the local level, which is sort of a game changer, right? And by processing that data at the local level and appending it to a blockchain, you can now fuel automation and do some really cool stuff. Just to give a plug to our partner at Forward Edge AI, these things have dual GPS sensors on them. You could be sending a GPS signal that tells the person that you're off in Uganda, even though you're in America, while your other GPS sensor is running on a blockchain and it is only telling the right people with clearances that you are exactly where you say you are. That's some really powerful technology right there, working in conjunction with the malware as well as the blockchain encryption. So I want to ask Aidan, tell us a little bit about the move that Panasonic sees getting into AI, specifically at the hardware level.
Yeah, I mean, so again, a lot of the things I mentioned earlier come into play here. So a lot of these mission critical job roles, the time is of the essence, right? So by putting AI at the edge, it really helps us to help our customers do a lot more, a lot faster, instead of having to rely on a steady connection. Another thing about a TOUGHBOOK is sometimes it's out in the desert or out in the middle of the ocean, and it could be a challenge to get to that traditional style of AI data set, which is in the cloud somewhere. So having AI empowerment at the edge with tools on the device itself can do a lot more for our customers. And it's just it's a common evolution right now of the hardware industry that we have to be able to power these devices adequately to do the things on board that they need to do. Maybe not as much large language stuff, but just being able to use that Intel NPU chipset that can really speed up production and do things faster for the customer. So obviously it's a move we had to make, and we're a niche player in the industry, but we really try to lean into those types of use cases that are really important. A lot of this edge compute can also help with federal requirements around CSFC, if you're familiar with that. With the commercial solutions for classified and SIPR NIPR net and all these ways to authenticate over the air. The more power on the device is always going to help that situation, right? So we got to push that envelope as hard as we can when it comes to that use case.
But GPS spoofing is, I mean, there are things that you need absolute truth for, and there are certain things that are subjective, right? But lat and long is super important. And GPS spoofing, you can have a device that's the size of one of these tables, and it can GPS spoof you, in a 5-block radius. And so, how do you guys think through that?
Yeah, so we have, in addition to all the solutioning and future stuff we're working on, we have a pretty robust set of applications and security levels that we have on the devices today. So we have a product that we use called ToughGuard. So that is the devices are they're able to be flashed out of the factory, and then when they arrive on scene for our customers, they can run these applications to ensure that those devices haven't been tampered with. We also work with a company called Eclipsium that does firmware security. So when people think about cybersecurity, they think about above the OS, malware, viruses, phishing, spear phishing. There's a lot of research lately that a lot of these attacks are now moving down to the firmware level, where if they can just get into the device at the firmware level, they can sit idle for years and collect data, and then eventually come in and do some malicious things there. So we work with these type of solutions that come onto the ToughBook as security layers to make sure that our customers can be protected at every level when it comes to spoofing or hardware tampering or even firmware, and firmware malware as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's in manufacturing, supply chain management. I mean, some of these chipsets have full OSs on them, so now the layer cake just got deeper for trying to authenticate and ensure that we don't have backdoors from China. This has become a big issue. It's one of the questions Erik often asks when we talk hardware. Where are you getting your chips? Where are they manufactured? And it's a great question just because of your background with China. Not your background with China, but, as your role states. But I do want to talk about DOGE. I know that we've got maybe about 5 or 6 more minutes here to wrap this up. I know it's a sensitive topic, but when we start thinking about transparency and trust, they're two different things, right? The more trust you have, the less transparency there is. The more transparency, the less trust you need, right? Because you can see it, you don't have to trust them for it. But here we have this new, this administration, and I think everybody has been sort of jaw-dropped of what has been, sort of revealed in the last 60 days even. What are your thoughts? I mean, you're more than welcome to share your opinions and sentiment, but I would just love to know what you think about what's going on here and how it's going to affect the human condition from the American state.
Look, I think for some people, they look at DOGE, those that are cynical about government, and maybe I'll put myself in that category, and you say, of course, it hasn't been transparent. Those that are more naive look at DOGE and say, oh my gosh, it's so their trust in government falls, whereas for some, DOGE is exposing things that increases my trust in government. I think it should be a bipartisan consensus that our government should be reined in, and what we should be doing is spending our taxpayer dollars judiciously. As a taxpayer, I think of what is my return on investment? What am I getting out of the taxes? And if I lived in New York, where it's 50+% taxes, I mean, I'm working from January until July for the government, and then from, August to December for my family. And I say, well, what am I getting for it, right? So imagine a world where everything that the government spends could be put on a blockchain, and it's very transparent. Other than, of course, sensitive operations that we have, or the CIA and things like that. But everything else is clearly demarcated. I think what that would do is it would, by far, increase our trust in government.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? I have to say there's transparent, and then there's naked, right? There's not everything in the government needs to be exposed on a blockchain for good reasons, national security reasons, right? At the same time, I think that everybody in America is tired of paying $6,000 for a toilet seat, right? So where's the loss in there? Where's the exchange? And after working with the government for 6 years, and us coming in and saying, hey, we have this tool that can provide this level of trust, it makes sense why a lot of them have been like, hey kid, why don't you pound sand? We don't want that. And I totally get it. It's like landlords, right? Landlords like to be a little bit gray because they have the power, because they're the lord of the land. And I see the same thing kind of happening with the federal government here. But Chris, do you have any thoughts on this topic? I'd love to hear from your perspective, because not only with Common Crawl, you have a rich background in not early tech and advanced systems.
Actually, this one, I'm the son of a former government senior executive service member who used to run the chemistry division of the Naval Research Labs, and I asked about a lot of these things. I mean, part of it is, it's sometimes a lot of this is characterization. Like when you talk about the $6,000 toilet seat, someone brought up there's a bolt that someone put on X, and it said, this bolt is $4,500, how can this be? Well, it turns out it's the bolt that secures a wing onto a plane, and it turns out it's $4,500. And you're like, all right. And it's like, I think that it's difficult to tell people what's reasonable, what's not reasonable without context. So I think there's a lot of things that we should be doing to make sure that our government is spending money wisely. And interestingly, it's the same thing that I remember Bill Clinton and Al Gore being on like the Letterman show, smashing a government ashtray with a hammer or something, being like, okay. And then Obama had his thing, and now we have this thing. And it's always a little controversial. I think that DOGE could probably use a better communications plan, but otherwise, I think that the real battles are ahead in terms of looking at reforming larger spending issues. I think that the zero-based budgeting that they're advocating, that the Defense Department would be a place that you really might not be in public view, but I think that's a really interesting place to start, because there's enough money there to really make a difference. But I don't certainly want to weaken the United States by doing it. So I think those are the trade-offs that you're going to look at.
Can you explain zero-based budgeting? I mean, because the way we budget normally is we say, well, what did we spend last year? Oh, we'll just tack on 5%, right? Zero-based budgeting is take it down to the studs. What do we actually need and what do we not need? And it's a revamping of how we contract, right?
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, I've seen this it's hard to make this happen, because as a person who's running a department, you go do zero-based budgeting, you have 50 people there and it says, oh, you need 2. Well, you got to get rid of 48 people. That's a really tough place to be. So it's always fought by the organization. So I think that the plan to get a plan might be the real issue there, as opposed to let's go in and start smacking certain people. It's more like, hey, how are we going to do this effectively and get everybody to come along and be able to transfer people from between departments? It's really hard to do this with an organization that's spending $1 trillion. So I don't envy them, but I do think that that's the kind of thing we're looking at, is how do you reform the process as opposed to just going in there and changing something on the surface.
All right, we got one last minute to wrap this up. I just want to do a 20-second each and just talk about the energy in the room today and what you guys experienced at this conference. We'll start with Aiden, we'll go to Erik. Aiden, what do you think about this conference?
Well, this is my first one, and I've told a few of you guys I'm a blockchain white belt, so very, very new to this, and I've learned a ton. This has been amazing. The energy is you can feel this buzz. I was telling Bennett, I'm kind of coming into this world, and I haven't seen the past 6 or 7 or 8 plus years you guys have been working on this stuff. From afar, maybe, but it's been. It just feels like an inflection point, and it's exciting. It seems cool. So yeah,
awesome.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, I mean, I've been with the chamber for 4 years as a fellow, and so I come to these things routinely. And for the first time in a very long time, there's a lot of excitement, and I think this is partially administration driven. This administration is much more forward leaning on blockchain and crypto. But it's also the maturity of the industry writ large has reached an inflection point, and everyone seems very interested in it.
Awesome. Chris, want to bring us home?
I've been going to tech conferences and as a speaker or a supporter since 1994. So it's 30 years going to conferences. This is an A. This is like the energy, just the output. The quality of the people working it, the quality of the staff, people are here, they're concentrating. This is great. And again, I say that as someone who's been to hundreds and hundreds of conferences. And the fact that it's 2x over last year, that's the sign, growth. Not only is it big, it's twice as big as last year. So I feel that this has been a really great opportunity. I really appreciate Constellation for bringing me along with you on this ride, and this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, man, I appreciate all you guys being here. So that's it. I just want to thank my panel here. Again, I'm Benjamin Diggles. Check out ConstellationNetwork.io. We launched our digital evidence product today, so you can check it out on our website along with the press release. And I'm honored that you guys are all partners and took the time to share the stage with me. Thank you very much.